Fun fact is I actually attribute the fact that I'm not sub 10 today to those horrible Bob Burton algorithms. I originally learned how to solve the Rubik's Cube back in 2006 when I was at a field and track day in elementary school, and a friend of mine, Spencer Kerwin, pulled out I guess it was a special edition Rubik's Cube that had a chrome sticker side instead of white. And that sparked my interest. I learned how to solve it using the layer by layer method and went from there. But cubing in 2006 it's not even comparable to what cubing is today. We didn't have Bluetooth cubes. We didn't have professional speed cubes. We didn't have an abundance of algorithm resources and all of the amazing stuff that you guys have today to enjoy. So pretty much we had our Rubik's brand cubes that we would cram Vaseline or generic like WD-40s or silicones that would eventually eat up the plastic. And we actually had a Rubix.com DIY kit, which was like one of the better options, but the downside was that the center caps didn't actually stick. So I had to use like a putty to try to hold the center caps onto the center piece to still be able to remove the cap and then adjust the tensions, because if you super glued it, you had to hope that your tensions were set very accurately. But we did have a Type A version 1 DIY kit, which was effectively a Rubik's Cube mechanism with a screw spring structure that you had to build yourself. Now, the funny thing is that the stickers were so thin and dark that the black plastic would bleed through actually and make the oranges and the yellows and the green look just absolutely horrible. So white plastic cubes were actually really popular back in the day simply because the white plastic was so much brighter that the sticker shades actually looked somewhat decent. So my friend Ben Hess and I were the two that really, we started off as like friendly cubing rivals in elementary school. And then we kind of kept going with it, whereas like Spencer and a few of our other friends kept cubing, but just didn't really ever progress much past like the 50-second solving mark. So Ben one day came to school and he went from averaging like my best time I think was like 45 seconds using the layer by layer method, or it might have been like a 39 or something like that with like a lucky skip or something like that. And one day Ben comes to school and he's solving in like the low 30s consistently. And I'm watching him solve and he's not doing 2-look OLL and 2-look PLL like what we had learned. He was doing 1-look PLL and it was decreasing his times dramatically. And he wouldn't tell me what the secret was for a long time being a few weeks, which is a long time for a 6th grader. And eventually he let the cat out of the bag and told me about the CFOP method, or the Jessica Friedrich method as it's also referred to. And we went to Bob Burton's CubeWiz.com, printed out our big paper algorithm sheets, carried them everywhere, and started learning the CFOP method. And fun fact is I actually attribute the fact that I'm not sub 10 today to those horrible Bob Burton algorithms, but I say that jokingly because I just need to learn better algorithms actually we sell the CFOP algorithm flashcards now, which I need to really just pick up a set of those on my own and learn better algorithms. But it's kind of fun almost using the old school algorithms, but I digress. So now that Ben and I are both learning CFOP and we're carrying our huge pieces of paper everywhere, and I mean, just learning these algorithms any chance we can get, trying to get like one new one every single day, our time started to decrease. We went from 40s to 30s to 20s to eventually sub 20s. And that was a really big barrier to break. I think it still is a very common kind of hurdle that's difficult for lots of cubers to get past, because it seems like that's where the look ahead really comes into play. And so anyway, we start to see our times go down and we start thinking about are there any competitions for these? And I think that my mom actually had heard about a Rubik's Cube competition that had happened somewhere, and she encouraged us to look into it ourselves. And lo and behold, we go onto the World Cube Association website and we see that there is a competition in April. This is 2008 now, by the way. Kind of missed that little time skip. So yeah, we actually went it was towards the end of 2006 that we started learning this, but we pretty much went a full year of like training montage before we eventually entered our first competition in April of 2008, which was at the Discovery Science Center in Santa Ana, California. And fortunately for Ben and I, that wasn't too far of a drive to where my parents were willing to take us down there, and Ben was able to tag along, which was really fun. So we decide like, okay, if we're gonna do this, we wanna go and we wanna do our best. And Ben and I are both super competitive, and we were both super young at that point. I mean, 2008, I don't know, I must have been like 12 at that point. Yeah, I would have been about 12. So, 12-year-olds going to a competition, and we want to do the best we could. So I remember we are like practicing our butts off the weeks leading up to the competition, and then the night before, we're practicing so much that our fingers were getting sore. And I think at that point we realized that we had to take it easy. I remember we'd even like make sure we cut our fingernails back and everything. And then there was a debate of, well, should we leave them a little bit longer so we can like grip the stickers better, because when they were cut short, it didn't feel the same. And so I remember the trip, like the hour and 45-minute drive it was to the competition, because we stopped off at my dad's house in LA, felt like an eternity. And we were so excited, and we pull up to the parking lot, and of course it was packed because it's a really cool venue actually. It's like a public science center where you can go in, and there's a bunch of like games and educational stuff that you can mess around with to learn about different scientific properties and things of that nature. So it was already busy on a Saturday morning, and parking was impossible. So I remember we're just dying on the inside to try to find a parking space, and we're like, man, just find a parking space so we can get in and go do this. And so we get into the venue, and it was really immersive. Like you walk in, it was kind of like dimly lit. There were like sounds everywhere, lights flashing from the different venues. There were people running all over the place, and it was a really cool, kind of overwhelming experience. And there was no signage indicating that there was a Rubik's Cube competition going on. And funny enough, the first staff member that we found at the Discovery Science Center and asked about the Rubik's Cube competition didn't even know that there was one happening that day. And we thought that maybe there was like a scheduling conflict or that we made a mistake. But luckily we found out that we saw other cubers walking out of this like auditorium, like a theater room in the very, 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 very back of the venue. So we walk in, and it is incredibly dark because it's a theater. So I remember thinking that the lighting was going to be a bit of a problem, and it was a really small stage that only had, I think, 2, maybe 4 tables on it. And it was cool though, because it had a bunch of like theater style seating, so parents and spectators could go and hang out. And back then the age demographic was a lot different. So we were 12 years old, and we were by far like the youngest ones. Like I would say that early to mid 20s was actually the more average age group for cubers back at that point in time. So we definitely were a little bit intimidated by the older guys and everything like that. But I remember we go and drop off our cubes at the scrambling station, and we go up, and I actually ended up getting an 18.44 second solve, and that was like really cool for me. I think I averaged like 21.59 is the average time that comes to mind. And luckily back then they gave you on your scorecards like a transcript on the back of it. So my mom actually kept that. As most moms do, they keep like commemorative stuff, which is fun because now I get to share it with you guys today. And I just remember that the whole day was just super fun, and being able to interact with other cubers and learning little tips and tricks here and there. And we were able to trade cubes. I actually ended up getting, I think it might have been my first Type A version 1 DIY kit, because at that point in time I was using a Rubik's.com DIY kit, which was it would pop like all over the place and wasn't really that good of a speed cube. But I remember that despite the lighting being bad, and you actually had to stand because they didn't have chairs available back then either at the venue. So we were having to stand and like legs were shaking, hands were shaking. And I remember the very first solve was so nerve-wracking, but once you get down with the very first solve and you sort of break past that mental barrier and you realize that, hey, if you can produce good results, whether for yourself or for podiuming, that's great. But as long as you're just there to have a good time, that's the #1 goal I think that people should keep in mind for cubing competitions. So it was all in all a really fun day. I remember that there was actually a documentary or something like that being filmed, and my friend Ben and I were actually featured in it. And it was like some weird, like random little, I shouldn't say documentary, like some weird little video. I'll try to include the clip if I could find that. And it just was so much fun. And then we actually did our next competition a month later in May, and it kind of kept going from there. So again, super grateful that I was able to participate in that. And you know, it was fun having a friend like Ben who was a good rival, and you know, we'd kind of compete against each other and everything like that. So it was all really good fun. And I actually just came out of retirement from competing for the first time about 2 months ago now for the Vegas SpeedCubing Summer competition that we just had here in Vegas. So it's kind of cool for it to all come full circle, and I you know, have now hosted my own official WCA competition, and I've done a few other unofficial events after. So again, really cool that in a span of 15 years it's all kind of come full circle, and it's really crazy to say that out loud, that I've been competing in cubing for 15 years as of right now. So it's just a really cool community to be involved with, and I'm super grateful that, you know, now I can be involved in different ways as a store owner and kind of somewhat of like a mentor to newer cubers that are looking for tips and tricks of where to get started and stuff like that. So if anyone ever has any questions or is nervous about competing, just shoot us over an email at SpeedCubeShop.com, and we're happy to help however we can or give you some advice. So yeah, definitely crazy, and looking forward now to maybe coming out of retirement and buying myself some CFOP algorithm flashcards and learning some good algorithms and getting that sub 10 average.